Mr. Greedy liked to eat. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. And the trouble was, the fatter he became, the more hungry he became. And the more hungry he became, the more he ate. And the more he ate, the fatter he became, and so it went on. One morning, Mr. Greedy awoke rather earlier than usual. As usual, he'd been dreaming about food, and that made him wake up feeling hungry. So Mr. Greedy got up, went downstairs, and ate the most enormous breakfast. This is what Mr. Greedy had for his breakfast. Toast, 2 slices. Cornflakes, 1 packet. Milk, 1 bottle. Sugar, 1 bowlful. Toast, 3 slices. Eggs, 3 boiled. Toast, 4 slices. Butter, 1 dish. Marmalade, 1 pot. Toast, 6 slices. That was a delicious breakfast. Now, I wonder what would be nice to have for lunch. He decided, in order to work up an appetite for lunch, that he would go for a long walk. That morning, Mr. Greedy walked and walked and walked. Then he discovered a cave. That's funny, he thought. I don't remember seeing that there before. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of fellow, decided to explore. He entered the dark cave. Inside, he discovered some giant steps leading upwards. Very steep, very difficult to climb, but with much huffing and puffing. Mr. Greedy climbed up and up. At the top of the steps, Mr. Greedy came to a door. It was, without doubt, the biggest door that Mr. Greedy had ever seen, and it wasn't quite shut. So Mr. Greedy squeezed himself through the crack in the door, and there before him was an amazing sight. The biggest room in the world. The floor was as big as a field. The table in the middle of the floor was as big as a house, and the chairs around it were as high as trees. Mr. Greedy felt very small, and then he sniffed. Coming from somewhere up on top of the gigantic table was the most delicious foody smell that Mr. Greedy had ever smelled. Mr. Greedy sniffed again, and then decided that he must get up onto that table. So he began to climb up the leg of the enormous chair. It was very difficult, but eventually Mr. Greedy stood on the table. Everything was larger than life. The salt and pepper pots were both as big as pillar boxes. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, and Mr. Greedy tried to lift one of the oranges. And Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, took a bite out of one of the apples there. Then he looked around. Over on the other side of the table stood the source of that delicious smell. A huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. And on the plate, huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal sausages the size of pillows. And huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal potatoes the size of beach balls. And huge, enormous, colossal peas the size of cabbages. Mr. Greedy hurried across the table towards the plate, and being Mr. Greedy, began to eat. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the plate, and Mr. Greedy found himself being picked up by a giant hand and looking into the eyes of a real live giant.
And who,
thundered the giant,
are you?
Mr. Greedy was so frightened that he could only just manage to squeak his name. Mr. Greedy, he squeaked. The giant laughed, a laugh as loud as thunder.
Greedy by name and greedy by nature,
he bellowed.
Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson.
And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy eat up everything on that huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. When he'd finished, Mr. Greedy felt very ill indeed, as if he would burst at any minute.
"No,"
said the giant in a much quieter voice.
"Do you promise never to be greedy again?"
Oh, yes, moaned Mr. Greedy. I promise.
"Very well,
Said the giant.
then I'll let you go." Oh, ho, 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 ho.
Mr. Greedy climbed down from the table and went out through the door, feeling very fat. And do you know, from that day to this, Mr. Greedy has kept his promise. And you know something else as well. Mr. Greedy doesn't look like he used to look anymore. He now looks like this, which I think suits him a lot better, don't you? So if you know anybody who's as greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants.
Ho, 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 ho. Ha, 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 ha. Then I'll let you go. Ha, 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 ha.
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising. She's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Little Miss Plump certainly was
What's that?
plump. She was as plump as a cushion. She lived in Cherry Cake Cottage. One lovely summer morning, she arrived home from an early morning walk. Feeling rather hungry, she went into her kitchen and cooked herself some breakfast. Some breakfast. Sausages. Now, if you had sausages for breakfast, or if I had sausages for breakfast, how many sausages would we have? One? Perhaps two? Maybe three. Guess how many sausages Miss Plump had for breakfast? 66. 66 succulent, sizzling sausages, which is difficult to say.
No, it isn't. 66. Oh, 66. Oh, 66 succulent, sizzling sausages.
And even more difficult to eat.
No, it isn't.
Miss Plump cut the last sausage on a plate in two and popped one half in her mouth.
That was nice. Now what shall I have?
Guess what?
Toast.
Now, if you had toast for breakfast, or if I had toast for breakfast, how many slices would we have? One? Two? Maybe three. Guess how many slices of toast Miss Plump had for breakfast? 23. 23 thick, tasty slices of tempting toast. And marmalade.
That was nice.
Just as Miss Plump was licking the last crumb of the 23rd slice of toast from her lips, there was a knock at the door of Cherry Cake Cottage. It was the postman.
Morning, Mr. Stang.
Oh, good morning, Miss Plump. I got a letter for you.
Oh, good. Do you like a cup of tea while you're here? I'm going to have one.
Oh, well, thank you. I'd love one. One indeed. Just look at the size of Miss Plump's teapot.
Shan't be long. Kettle's just boiled. Sugar, Mr. Stang.
Yes, just one lump, Miss Plump, thank you. Oh, that's nice. Oh, I love a good cup of tea.
So do I. I shall have 2 or 3 every morning when I have my breakfast.
Oh, it's turned out a lovely day, isn't it?
Oh, that's a beautiful
Oh, it's a
cup
nice
of
cup
tea.
of tea,
I used to
that.
sell myself.
Well, thank you for the tea. I must be on my way. No, don't get up. I'd see myself out.
Bye-bye, Mr. Stamp.
After Miss Plump had said goodbye to the postman, she poured herself another cup of tea. Another after the 11 other cups she'd had already. And then she opened the letter. It was from Mr. Greedy. Dear Miss Plump, next Wednesday is my birthday. Please come to tea at 4 o'clock. And it was signed Mr. Greedy.
Oh, lovely. I shall look forward to that.
Wednesday was a fine sunny day.
I think I wear my new hat. Oh, dear. Oh, that's better.
And after a little light lunch, I'll tell you what later, Miss Plump set off in her car to drive to Mr. Greedy's.
Oh, I must get a bigger car.
But before she set off, she put something on the back seat of her car. Something large. It was Mr. Greedy's birthday present.
Now what's wrong with you?
Plump, plump, little Miss Plump, how she loves her lovely food. Plump, plump, little Miss Plump, with an appetite for 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe more. She eats and eats and eats some more.
At 4 o'clock precisely, Miss Plump pulled up in front of Mr. Greedy's roly-poly sort of a house.
Hello, Mr. Greedy.
Oh, hello, Miss Plump.
Happy birthday, Mr. Greedy.
Oh, thank you. Do come in. The tea's all ready. Oh, it's so nice to see you again. Oh, and what is this?
It's your birthday present.
Oh, you shouldn't have. And he started pulling off the wrapping paper. Oh, it's the loveliest cake I've ever seen.
I only put one candle on it because I didn't know how old you were.
Oh, you shouldn't have, you know, but I'm glad that you did.
I baked it today. I have a confession to make.
Oh.
This isn't the only cake I baked today. The first one was so delicious, I had it for breakfast.
Oh, yes, I quite understand.
And the second one looked so lovely, I couldn't help myself. I ate it for lunch.
And the third, I presume, Miss Plump, is for tea. Would you care to join me?
Oh, yes. That lovely cheese.
Would I interest you in a milkshake, Miss Plump?
Here, Mr. Greedy. Oh, that's lovely.
Chips.
Oh, you got ice cream all over your nose.
Oh, never mind, I'll lick it off.
Jam.
You've got
Lovely jam
rather a piled plate, Miss Plump.
Mr. Greedy. Just a tiny bit more, Mr.
Same
Greedy.
again, same again.
Yes, just a tiny weeny bit.
Wonderful,
Oh, you
yeah.
forced me.
She's Plump.
He's a bit late and naughty.
She's troublesome.
We're helpful, tiny, neat,
I'm silly.
happy, little Miss Sunshine.
I'm fuzzy and greedy.
And